In this video I'm going to attempt to make what they call a Gerber Baby Wash. However, in this instance I don't have any Gerber Baby Wash, I've got this instead. It's a Nestle cereal, instant cereal wheat with probiotics. This particular packet was 200 grams, and I think it was like $4 or something from the supermarket. Other products I'm going to be using is this yeast, instant dried yeast. That was, I think, $3, maybe $4 for a 280 gram tin, so it's quite large. And I've got 6 kilos of sugar, as I would normally be using to make a wash. So what I'll do first is I'll need to get that sugar, dissolve it, and also add this wheat to it. And I'm going to dissolve it in this metal pot by adding water, heating it up to a nice temperature, maybe about 70 degrees. I don't want to boil it or anything, I just want to heat it up just to help the sugar dissolve into the water, and then I'll add the cereal and see how that goes. Before I do that, I want to hydrate some of this yeast. I've never done this before, so by hydrating it, I'm assuming it will help it out in the long run. Let's go 5 teaspoons of yeast, just leveled. One, 4, 5, and I'll just let that sit in there and we'll soak it up. And I like to just keep the yeast stored away in the freezer, so I'll just pop that in there. If you didn't want to use cooking yeast, you could go out to the store for a couple of dollars. You could buy one of these, brewing yeast. This is made for beer, but there's no reason why you couldn't use that to make a wash with. Right, while that yeast is hydrating, I'm going to now fill the stainless steel container up. Now I'm going to be adding 6 kilos of sugar into this pot, and then I'm going to, once it's all dissolved in there and I'm happy with it, I'm going to be placing it in this fermenter here, which is I think it's a 30-litre fermenter. Just give it a good stir. Now you don't want this to heat up too hot to the point where it's boiling, because what you're going to have happen is you're going to get all of your sugar that you put in and it's going to start sticking to the bottom of your pan and potentially will start burning. So it's important to watch this as you're doing it, because if you burn it to the bottom of your pan, you're going to introduce all of those burnt flavours into your wash, plus the quality of your sugar is going to be degraded because you burnt it. Quite a thick sugary water now. The sugary water is becoming like a syrup, but if you have a look, you can still see that it's not completely dissolved. There's lots of sugary granules in there. What I'm going to do is just put a small amount of the sugar water just on this spoon, and then add that to the yeast that's soaking. Now it's only been soaking for a couple of minutes, so I haven't stirred it in, and I haven't put this spoon into the yeast. I've kept that out. So this is what they call inverting your sugar. It helps it dissolve in the water because you've got it soaking in there. It helps when you're putting in your wash because the sugar's already dissolved in the water. It helps the yeast consume it to turn that into alcohol. So most of the sugar is dissolved itself in the mixture. I can't feel any lumps or clumps of sugar when I'm stirring. So I think now's a good time to add this. Now, the recipes on the internet that I found all recommended using Gerber. However, I didn't have any Gerber in my shops. This is the only other thing that we had. Yeah, this is wheat. There's some nutritional information here. So I'm adding the entire contents of this, and as I said before, this is a 200 gram box, and it looks just like a powder in there. So I'm at a point now where this is pretty warm. I couldn't leave my hand on there much longer than that, so I'm just turning the heat off, but I'll still leave it on the element so it can contain some residual heat, and just keep mixing that through for another couple of minutes, and then that'll be ready to add to the fermenter, and I'll be able to add the yeast shortly after that. There's a lot of sugar that's stuck to the actual pot, but I'll just let that sit and it will pour itself out. Swishing that through with some cold water. You could use hot water if you wanted. Now I want to bring this up to the 25 litre mark, which is here. Now, I'm not going to add all of that last litre because I've got this yeast now. You can see it's gone from the original 200 mils, I think it was, or just below that. It's now pushed up to almost 300 mils or 10 ounces. So it's at the point now where it just needs a nice stir. Inside it, it's looking all bubbly and lumpy. Give that nice stir with a clean spoon. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water into that, just to thin it out. And I'll just let that sit for a couple of minutes while I'll talk about this. So it's completely solid looking. You can't actually see through it. It's not clear or anything. It looks like everything that you put in there, sugar and baby food. At the moment, what's an important thing to check is the temperature. So my temperature gauge has got 34 and 36 degrees centigrade, so it's probably about 35, which isn't ideal. You probably want it to be about 30 degrees for your yeast to take a good hold. So unfortunately I live in a hot climate, can't really do much about that, but what I can do is I can put some ice in the top. So adding ice to it will cool the top layer down, and then when I add the yeast in there, it will be a little bit cooler at the top. So that's all good, ready to go in there now. Now it's time to seal it up, keep any nasties out of it. And I've just got an air bubbler. So it's now 10 to 1 AM in the morning, and the yeast is bubbling. Clarity of it, it's gone a pale yellow colour, and whatever sugar didn't dissolve is now sitting at the bottom. And we'll see how that goes tomorrow, if it increases in its volume of gas it's producing and alcohol. So it's now the next morning, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning on 25th, and it's still fermenting. It's bubbling away. It's not as fast as what a turbo yeast would be bubbling at, but it's still quite impressive. And once again, you can see the pale colour, and there does look like some solid sediment down here. We're sitting at about 33 degrees, maybe lower. So today's day 9. The bubbling's really slowed down over the last 4 days or so, and it's probably bubbling once every 30 seconds to a minute. And the colour of it, it's a yellowy colour, and there's a thick layer of sludge and whatnot at the bottom. But it's come up, it's a yellowy. Just taking the lid off, show you what it looks like inside. Let's do a hydrometer reading. So ideally, you'd want it to be down here. If it was one of the turbo yeasts, you'd be below that 1000 mark. But it seems to be a bit more denser, so it's pushing it up to about 60. So I'm just giving it a bit of a stir now. This will help degas it, and if there is any sugar that's sitting at the bottom that needs to be eaten by the yeast, it'll bring it up and mix it in so it can get consumed. And what I'll do now is I'll just leave this hydrometer in here, so next time I go to take a reading it'll be a bit easier. It's on there nice and tight now, and the hydrometer's spinning around, so I can kind of see it if I look carefully if it's over this side. So hopefully I'll be able to just read it without having to take the lid off again. So I've been away for a while now with work and went on a holiday, and I've come back now, and this has still been fermenting away whilst I've been gone. I just let it go. It's been going now for an additional 9 weeks. Additional 9 weeks now. It's finished fermenting. It should be alright. It's all just been sitting in there. You can see the sediment on the bottom, and it's a pale yellow colour. So it's pretty cloudy for that first bit. We'll just tip that out. It's got a bit of, you can see floating sediment there that's just being pulled through from the bottom. It is a pale colour, it's not clear. It's nothing like you would expect from a commercial grade yeast product, like your turbo yeast. But what we'll do is we'll give it a go anyway and see what we end up getting. So we'll just run a hydro reading on that, see what it comes up with. Definitely floating on the bottom. Nothing spectacular. Come up. That'd be about 5%, I think. So if this was a beer, this would be alright. So you see 5% there. And it's sitting below the 5% mark. But we'll still give it a run through and see what the final product is. Cap full of that defoamer. Put these brew enhancers in there. After pulling through that 5 litres, we'll just fill up another glass, and it's a lot less sediment in that, and you can see it's a lot clearer. Still that yellow tinge to it, but it is definitely looking better. You can see through it. Brings up to 5 litres, so we'll give that a go and test what it outputs. So far from 5 litres, I've now got half a litre or 500 mils. So looking at it, looking closely at the hydrometer, it's sitting just above 30, so maybe about 32% alcohol. The current temperature is about 29 degrees, so it means that this is out by about 5%, so it'll go in actuality it's probably lower, so it's probably about 26, maybe 27 if you're lucky, % alcohol. So it seems about half a litre out of 5 litres is what you want to stop at. If you keep going anymore, you'll get less and less alcohol. Or you just want them to be less alcoholic. This is, for the amount I've paid for it, I think it was less $7 or something ridiculous, and I'll get a couple of litres out of this for sure. So I'll let you know how many I actually get. Final run through, I ended up getting 3 litres out of that entire batch, and the percentage of alcohol is less than 30%, more than 25, so let's say 28 just to cover it. It's not a massive amount of alcohol, but for the cost of what that was, it's kind of worth it, I guess. If you are willing to wait probably 3 weeks for it to finish fermenting, maybe even 4, depending on how warm it was, then, you know, go for it. If you've got a pretty good still which can extract more alcohol than what I've just got a pot still, then go for it. If you just want to try it and don't have much money and you've figured, why not? Go for it. But if you want results of alcohol that's 40%, and out of that same amount of stuff that I was producing, you want double that, you want 6 litres, then don't do this at all. You're just wasting your time, not so much money, but a little bit. I would recommend this to you if you didn't have a pot still, if you had, say, a reflux still, and you wanted to just experiment around and not have to pay top dollar for using turbo yeasts. That's alright. I probably wouldn't do it again unless I was strapped for cash, in which case I would, but for what it's worth, less than 30% vodka, it's not bad.